In 1950, every major American railroad had stopped building steam locomotives. Baldwin had stopped, Alco had stopped, Lima had stopped. The Pennsylvania Railroad was buying diesels off a catalog. The New York Central was buying diesels off a catalog. The Union Pacific had already retired the big boy class. In Roanoke, Virginia, the Norfolk and Western Railway was building 3 more. Not buying them, building them. In its own shops, with its own engineers, to its own specifications. The machine that came out of those shops on May 29, 1950, was the finest passenger steam locomotive ever built in the United States. N&W built 14 of them between 1941 and 1950. It scrapped 13 between October 1958 and October 1959. One survived. It runs through July 5th. Tell American Iron Works in the comments, when a company destroys the thing it built better than anyone else, what do you call that? Subscribe to American Iron Works. This series covers the engineering decisions and institutional battles that built this country's industrial spine. The Norfolk and Western Railway did not buy locomotives from outside builders because it believed its own shop forces could produce better machines than Baldwin, Alco, or Lima. That belief was not arrogance, it was accurate. The Roanoke East End Shops had been building steam locomotives since 1884. By 1950, those shops had produced 447 locomotives, all for N&W, all refined through 66 years of accumulated institutional knowledge that no outside manufacturer could match. The shop workforce included machinists, boilermakers, pattern makers, and precision engineers who had spent entire careers learning one thing: how to build steam locomotives in Appalachian terrain. Conditions for Appalachian terrain demands. That workforce was the institutional asset. The machines were what the asset produced. The J-class design process began in the late 1930s, when Norfolk and Western's mechanical department determined that its existing passenger fleet, the K2 and K2A 482 Mountains, could no longer handle rising passenger traffic on the 676.6-mile main line between Norfolk, Virginia, and Cincinnati, Ohio. That route crossed the Blue Ridge Mountains and the Allegheny Highlands. Steep grades, heavy consists, tight schedules. Norfolk and Western's engineers designed a locomotive that could handle all 3 simultaneously without a helper engine. The result was the Class J, a 484 configuration with 70-inch driving wheels, 300 pounds per square inch of boiler pressure, 80,000 pounds of tractive effort, and Timken roller bearings on every moving point. Axles, main rods, side rods, valve gear, and wrist pins. The roller bearing specification on every moving point reduced friction so completely that a fully loaded J-class, weighing 872,600 pounds, could be moved by 4 people pulling a rope. The shops could fully service a J-class locomotive in 1 hour. One machine averaged 15,000 miles per month. The full class of 14 handled 80% of N&W's passenger traffic. In December 1944, N&W loaned one J-class locomotive, number 610, identical in design to the 611, to the Pennsylvania Railroad for testing on the Fort Wayne Division, the PRR's flat, straight main line through Indiana. The PRR called the Fort Wayne Division its racetrack. N&W number 610 hauled a 15-car, 1,050-ton train at speeds in excess of 110 miles per hour. 3 separate runs hit between 110 and 111 miles per hour. The PRR's own engineers described the result as genuinely surprising. The J-class driving wheels were smaller than standard for high-speed locomotives, a design configuration that should have limited top speed. It did not limit top speed because the counterbalancing was so precise that the theoretical maximum without rail damage was 140 miles per hour. N&W's mechanical department had built a coal country freight hauler that outperformed the finest passenger railroad in the country on that railroad's own fastest stretch of track. The last 3 J-class locomotives, number 611, 612, and 613, were completed in the summer of 1950. They were the last mainline passenger steam locomotives built in the United States. No American railroad would build mainline passenger steam again. number 6111 came out of the Roanoke Shops on May the 29th, 1950, at a cost of $251,544. It went to work on Norfolk and Western's named passenger trains, the Powhatan Arrow, the Pocahontas, and the Cavalier, on the daily run between Norfolk and Cincinnati. It also ferried Southern Railway trains through the Blue Ridge Mountains between Monroe and Bristol, Virginia. It ran at 90 miles per hour on Norfolk and Western's mountain main line. In September 1952, number 611 pulled Dwight D. Eisenhower's presidential campaign train from Columbus, Ohio to Canova, West Virginia. In January 1956, number 611 derailed near Cedar, West Virginia while pulling the Pocahontas. The engineer died. 60 passengers and crew were injured. Most railroads scrapped steam locomotives involved in accidents of that severity. Norfolk and Western President Robert H. Smith ordered number 611 repaired and returned to service. The repair required a near-complete boiler overhaul. That decision, to repair rather than scrap, left number 611 with a rebuilt boiler. At the moment, everything changed. That rebuilt boiler is the reason we are talking about number 611 today and not number 607. By the late 1950s, the economics of diesel had become impossible to argue against even for a railroad burning its own coal. Diesel locomotives required less maintenance, far fewer specialized craftsmen, and could be serviced in facilities a fraction of the size and complexity of the Roanoke Shops. N&W ordered 268 new GP9 diesel locomotives from Electromotive Diesel in the late 1950s. The J-class locomotives were reassigned from passenger trains to local freight service as the new diesel locomotives arrived. In late December 1958, number 611 was taken out of service and stored at Bluefield, West Virginia in the deadline queue, waiting for the trip to the scrapyards at Portsmouth, Ohio. 13 of its sister locomotives had the same destination. All of them had run more than 2 million miles. All of them were mechanically capable of continued operation. They were scrapped because the institution that built them had decided it no longer needed them. The first J-class to go was number 604, scrapped October 24, 1958. All 13 were gone by the end of October 1959. The program took 12 months. The craftsmen at Roanoke, who had spent decades perfecting those machines, watched them go to the torch while the institutional need for their expertise disappeared alongside them. The Roanoke Shops at their peak employed thousands of workers with skills that had no application outside steam locomotive construction. Machinists who knew how to true a driving wheel to tolerances measured in thousandths of an inch. Boilermakers who had spent careers learning how firebox sheets behave at 300 pounds per square inch over thousands of operating cycles. Pattern makers who held the designs for parts that existed nowhere in any commercial catalog. When the scrapping program ended and the diesel transition was complete, those skills had nowhere to go. By May 1960, N&W had completed its transition to diesel, the last major Class I railroad in the United States to do so. The Roanoke Shops retooled for diesel maintenance and repair. In December 1953, those same shops had completed the last standard-gauge steam locomotive produced for domestic revenue service in the United States, a switcher designated Class S1A, number 244. A building that had been producing steam machinery since 1884 made its last steam machine in 1953, went on to maintain other companies' diesel locomotives for 67 more years, and was closed by Norfolk Southern in 2020. Genesis Rail Services leased the property in July 2023. The city of Roanoke, which grew from a farming hamlet called Big Lick to a population of 82,000 because N&W put its shops there in 1881, has been contracting ever since the steam shops closed. The institutional capability that produced number 611 does not exist anywhere in the United States today. Which brings us to a Washington, D.C. lawyer named W. Graham Claytor Jr. Claytor was a Roanoke native and a rail fan. He had no institutional authority over the Norfolk and Western Railway. He was vice chairman of the Roanoke chapter of the National Railway Historical Society. He wrote letters. Beginning in the early 1950s, Claytor had been writing to N&W President Stuart T. Saunders, the same Stuart Saunders who would later architect the Penn Central merger and preside over the largest corporate bankruptcy in American history, urging that N&W preserve at least one J-class in operating condition, not on static display. Operating. Saunders was not a steam advocate. He was the man dismantling the steam operation. But in 1959, the letters and the timing and the circumstance came together. Number 611 had a near-new boiler from the 1956 wreck repair, the deciding factor in choosing which one to save. O. Winston Link, the New York commercial photographer who had been documenting Norfolk and Western steam since January 1955, making 2,400 negatives across Virginia, West Virginia, Maryland, and North Carolina, using synchronized night photography with up to 43 flashbulbs firing simultaneously, reportedly offered to purchase number 611 personally rather than see it scrapped. An offer from a private citizen to buy a locomotive out of the scrap line reportedly embarrassed Norfolk and Western into donating it instead. Claytor requested that number 611 be moved under its own power from Bluefield back to Roanoke. On May 22, 1959, with the scrapping program still active and 13 of its sisters were already gone or going, number 611 made that run. Norfolk and Western donated it to the city of Roanoke in 1962. It went on display at the Roanoke Transportation Museum. It sat there for 20 years. The institution had built the finest steam locomotive in the country. It scrapped 13 of 14 in 12 months. One survived because a lawyer kept writing letters to the right man at the right time, a photographer offered to buy it himself, and a near-new boiler from a wreck happened to be the deciding factor in a bureaucratic calculation about which machine to keep. That is how close it came. Now the three-part survival story. In 1982, 23 years after number 611 last turned a wheel in revenue service, Robert B. Claytor, the president of Norfolk and Western, in its final months before the merger with Southern Railway to form Norfolk Southern, decided to restore it. Robert Claytor was W. Graham Claytor Jr.'s brother. The same family that pulled number 611 from the scrap line in 1959 brought it back in 1982. Number 611 was restored at Southern Railway's Norris Yard Steam Shop in Birmingham, Alabama. The overhaul took approximately a year and required sourcing parts for a locomotive whose manufacturer had been out of production for decades. It moved under its own power for the first time in nearly 23 years on August 14, 1982, and arrived back in Roanoke on August 22nd for the city's centennial anniversary, Robert Claytor himself at the throttle for the return trip. Over the next 12 years, it ran as far south as Florida, as far north as New York, as far west as Illinois and Missouri. Then Norfolk Southern killed it again. In September 1994, a yard accident in Lynchburg, Virginia, unrelated to number 611, damaged several Norfolk Southern excursion cars. Norfolk Southern raised its liability insurance requirement from $10 million to $25 million. In October 1994, Norfolk Southern announced it was ending the steam excursion program. Safety concerns, rising insurance costs, maintenance expense, freight network congestion. The stated reasons were real. The unstated reason, Robert Claytor had retired. His successor had no attachment to the program and no patience for its economics. On December 3, 1994, number 611 pulled the final Norfolk Southern steam excursion from Birmingham to Chattanooga. 4 days later, it arrived back in Roanoke. The fire was extinguished. The boiler flue time certificate expired in early 1995. Number 611 went back on static display for 19 years. In 2013, the Virginia Museum of Transportation formed the Fire Up 611 Committee to determine if a third restoration was feasible. The committee was chaired by Preston Claytor. Preston Claytor was Robert B. Claytor's son. The third generation of the same family, the same machine, 54 years after W. Graham Claytor Jr. first started writing letters to Stuart Saunders. The committee determined the restoration would cost $3.5 million. The VMT launched a public campaign. Approximately 3,000 individual donors across 18 countries contributed $2.3 to $2.5 million. Norfolk Southern donated $1.5 million from the proceeds of selling a Mark Rothko painting. The railroad sold a piece of fine art to help restore a steam locomotive it had twice discarded. On May 9, 2015, number 611 moved under its own power for the first time in nearly 21 years. It has run excursion seasons every year since. Which brings us to July 5, 2026, and the thing that does not appear in the Summer of Steam promotional materials. The Federal Railroad Administration mandates a 1,472 service day boiler inspection for every mainline steam locomotive, a complete disassembly, full interior cleaning, ultrasonic testing, and recertification that takes months and costs significant money. Number 611's last full inspection was the 2015 restoration. The next one is due approximately 2030. The VMT does not yet have the funding for it. The Summer of Steam excursion seasons are partly fundraisers for that inspection. July 5th is a soft deadline. 2030 is the hard one. The machine that survived scrapping in 1959, institutional abandonment in 1994, and near-permanent retirement in 2013, now faces a regulatory and funding deadline that determines whether it runs for the rest of this decade. The Roanoke Shops that built it closed in 2020. The craftsmen who built it are gone. The institutional knowledge that produced it does not exist anywhere in the United States. Number 611 is 110 feet long, weighs 872,600 pounds, still burns coal, and runs at 90 miles per hour through mountain terrain on a route it has covered since 1950. It is the last machine the Roanoke Shops ever produced at full capability. It is also one of the last places in the United States where you can stand next to a physical object that represents what American precision manufacturing looked like at its ceiling, not in a museum case, but under steam, moving. Which part of this accounting lands hardest? That N&W scrapped 13 of them in 12 months, or that the same family had to save it 3 times? N&W built the finest steam locomotive in American history. Then, it scrapped 13 of them in a year. One man kept writing letters, his brother brought it back, his son raised the money to bring it back again. The machine is still there. The shops that built it are not. If the history in this series is the kind of record you want to help build, subscribe to American Iron Works. The next stop on this route has its own accounting.